Today, we are going to be talking about a subject that I asked you guys about on Instagram, and that is travel to Japan. I put out a vote and I asked, would you be more interested in hearing about my heritage or some of my travel tips or observations from my time in Japan? And the overwhelming majority said my time in Japan, but being that there weren't that many votes, I will probably get back to my heritage at a later date. I did take a DNA test in December to determine my background, and while a lot of it was what I thought it was, there was a big chunk that was really surprising to me, so I would like to get back to that at some time. Now, if you're not familiar with my Instagram, I'll leave the handle down below in the description, and you can check that out at a later time if you're interested. For those of you who don't know, in December, I also took a self-planned about 2-week trip to Japan with my dad and my husband, and we went from Tokyo all the way down to Nagasaki. We started at the Tokyo Disneyland Resort, went on to Mount Fuji, then continued to Kyoto, Hiroshima, and finally Nagasaki before flying back to Tokyo for a few days. Before the trip even began, I was given the responsibility of planning everything. And with that responsibility came a lot of research. If you're anything like me, I sometimes get on a subject and then I just can't stop researching. So this kind of became my full-time job for the second half of 2018. I wasn't working, and this is really the thing that I took on. For my research, I used television, internet, and friends, the 3 basic things that I would recommend to anybody. Friends and family, if you ever answered any of my questions about what to do, what to see, where to go, thank you so much. I used every little bit of advice in some way, whether or not I was able to make it every place that was recommended to me. When it comes to television, I watched a lot of NHK to get ideas of different things we might be interested in seeing. And while it was a good jumping off point, obviously that doesn't get too detailed on the specifics of our trip. So I turned to the internet. YouTube was my savior. It taught me a lot of little intricate details about culture and behavior that I should know before I go, and for that I'm super grateful. But there were still some things that surprised me once I got to Japan, and that's what we're gonna go over today. 6 things that surprised me once I got to Japan. Now, if you're wondering, I did consult Nick for this video also, and that's why there's 6 things and not 5, because I had 5. He gave me another. Now we have 6. Yes, I have a drink with me now. Don't talk to me about continuity.
Continuity?
Number 1, we are not too big for Japan. Everywhere I looked, all these videos I watched would talk about that stereotype that Japanese people are so tiny, and it really got me worrying. Like,
is my 6'2" husband going to fit on the train? Are we going to be too large for the airplane seats that we purchased to go from Nagasaki to Tokyo? Are the beds going to be too short? Because in most of our hotel rooms, there were 3 beds, one of which was just kind of like a cot.
I was really concerned before leaving, but I just decided to close my eyes and jump in and just not worry about it until we got there. Well, my friends, I'm glad I did that, because guess what? Americans are not too big for Japan. I don't know why this stereotype is perpetuated. Yes, my 6'2" husband had to duck through a couple doorways now and then, but for the most part, it's perfectly comfortable. None of the beds were too short. When you think about airplane seats, kind of standard anywhere. How often have you gotten on a domestic flight in the US and been comfortable in your seat? It was exactly the same size there, because that's kind of a standardized thing. The Shinkansen, I almost bought green car tickets, which is an upgrade, just so that we could have more legroom. That would have been a huge waste of money and time, because you have to reserve your seats for those cars. It wasn't necessary. According to Wikipedia, the average male in Japan is around 5'7.5", and in the United States around 5'9". You guys, you're not that much taller. I would also like to mention that we saw several men who were around 6 feet tall and several people who were definitely obese. So yeah, Americans are on average heavier, but I don't think that should be something that concerns you if you take a trip there. With all that said, there was only one time where I can recall something being comically small for us, and that was when we were in Disneyland. Nick simply didn't fit well in some of the rides. Number 2. The food in Japan surprised me. Now, okay, this might sound kind of dumb, right? Like anyone can go online and look at pictures of food or watch videos about food. There should be a lot of things that I knew before I went there, but I'm gonna tell you what surprised me about the food. I found that the food quality in certain locations, such as fast service, is way higher. Let me explain. You see this cup right here? This came from Starbucks, and we went to Starbucks maybe 3 or 4 times during our trip. The reason I kept going back is because the drinks were incredible. Not syrupy and heavy. No, they were always lightly flavored, even if they were a sweet beverage. But not only that, the actual food selection and size of the food that you could buy at Starbucks was so much greater than what you find in the States. And that's not a dig on what's at Starbucks in the States, right? That's standard for us. They had like scones. Okay, I'm putting this down. I can't demonstrate without my hands. They had scones that were like this large. My husband had a biscuit that was probably the size of a burger. They had bread bowls with soup. They had full-size sandwiches, like large sandwiches. And everything looked so fresh and just amazing in comparison to what I'm used to seeing in the cases here. There's a reason for this. In Japan, there's a huge konbini culture, like literally on every corner. Some of the more popular ones are 7-Eleven, there's Family Mart, there's Lawson. You can go into a convenience store there and you can buy a very decent pastry and a nice coffee for like 250, 300 yen. Okay, that's about $2.50 or $3. If you go to Starbucks and you're spending $6 on your coffee and pastry there, it has to be awesome because people can fly into these convenience stores anytime they want and they're everywhere. So Starbucks has to operate on a different level in Japan. Same goes with any other fast food place there for the same reason. So what I was most surprised about with the food in Japan is that the quality is heads above ours in certain categories. Number 3, dress code. Now that I've spoken about our giant Western bodies, the food that we stuff into those bodies, how about I talk about the clothes that we put on our bodies? I knew before we traveled to Japan that they are a very modest culture in dress, and thankfully for us, it was winter when we visited, so this wasn't hard to adapt to. And by American standards, I tend to be a pretty modest dresser anyhow. What I didn't realize was how seriously people were going to take this. For example, I brought a V-neck sweater with me that simply didn't pass the test, and I will show you that sweater right now. This is it. This is the offending sweater. This was too much for Japan right here. That was probably too much for everybody. I'm sorry for doing that. I'll leave now. That's right. This sweater was too scandalous for Japan. And you know how I know? I wore it to Tokyo Disney Sea, and on that day, I was not only ogled by a strange man that I don't know, but also a pack of teenage boys around lunchtime, and then later I had holes burned through my head by a married woman who was waiting in line with me at the concierge. Okay. By that time, I knew it was my sweater that was offensive. If I wore a jacket, it was no problem, but any time that my jacket was off, this sweater was just too much. Reason being, the rule of thumb in Japan is to keep things up around the collarbone. Also, don't wear things that are skin tight. I guess that I figured since my skin was mostly covered and I don't really have cleavage that it wouldn't be a problem, but I guess I just didn't realize how seriously people take this. And a lot of that comes from a culture of collectivism, where you aim to make other people comfortable. There's nothing wrong with that, but sometimes that means that if you are sticking out a little too much as an individual, you'll get some negative attention. All of that said, Japan is a leg country. You will see legs out at any time of year. So even during the winter, girls will be wearing mini skirts with tights. I even saw people wearing shorts with tights. Legs are fine, but keep away from showing that sternum, okay? Number 4, related to the clothing culture, shoe culture. If there's one thing that a lot of Americans know about Japan, it's that they take their shoes off before they go inside. But guess what? That really didn't affect us on our trip. Now, they provide you with slippers in your hotel room that you're supposed to wear around the room and take off before you go into the bathroom and then put back on when you come out of the bathroom. But aside from that, we never had to take our shoes off for anything. Now, if we had gone to more private restaurants or private establishments, that might have been the case, but we only had a couple sit-down meals. So while I would say bring some cute socks, I would also say that this is something that probably won't affect you that much. The 5th thing that I'm going to mention is language. Now, if you come from an English-speaking country as I do, you might have heard a million times before that in Japan, nobody speaks English, or there's very little English, or it's hard to get around because there's not a lot of English. Japan is preparing for the 2020 Tokyo Olympics right now, and it is their goal to make it more comfortable for travelers from all over the world to come there, to get around easily, to enjoy themselves. And I have to tell you that everywhere we went, there was English sprinkled about. If you went to the konbini and you bought yourself a snack or something, it would often have a small label with a simple English description on it. Even when I would check into hotels, I would often come in and try to start the conversation in Japanese, of which I know very little, and they would cut me off before I could get there and start speaking to me in English. They wanted to do it. It's part of Japan's, I guess, customer-centered thinking. They want to serve you in the way that you want to be served. And so when they would see us coming, they would go, probably English speakers, and they would beat us to the punch. Another story that really blew my mind is when we were in Nagasaki and we went to the Starbucks. I just went there to buy a tumbler as a souvenir. And when we went in, it was so sweet. They were very excited to see us. They brought us free shots of espresso. And when I got up to the counter, this girl blew my mind. She spoke perfect English. When she gave me my coupons for a free drink to go along with this cup, she said, "I don't know if you know this, but you can bring this coupon back." I don't know if you know this. That is such a fluent turn of phrase. You'll be surprised when you go how people come out of the woodwork who've really been practicing, who really want to impress you with their English. Also, that there's just a lot of practical signage. Japan also covers everything in arrows and symbols to show you which way to go, where you want to be. They color code all of their stations, so you don't need to speak Japanese to get around easily. And especially in this era of Google Translate and other useful technology and tools, there really isn't a reason to avoid a place just because of language. Number 6. This is Nick's contribution and one that I so foolishly looked over when I first recorded this video. Everything works. In Japan, everything works, and if it doesn't work, we must fix it. Now, as an American, I look at the way that things work here as the standard. I know that a lot of things don't always work the way that they should, but we don't expect perfection. In Japan, they just have such high standards for themselves, and because of that, a lot of things run really smoothly. One funny example is that elevator buttons actually work. If you get onto an elevator and you press that door close button, you best have all your limbs inside the elevator because it will close, and it will close now. I think nowhere was this rule of efficiency more evident than on our flight from Nagasaki back to Tokyo. Not only did everything run smoothly at the counter, do you want to guess how soon we boarded our flight? 15 minutes before departure. None of this nonsense where people are standing up 30 minutes in advance and crowding the counter and trying to get on before their zone's even called. No, 15 minutes before, they called people by zone, they all calmly stood from their seats and boarded the plane like human beings. It was fabulous. And then not only that, but we ended up arriving a couple minutes early. We all got onto a shuttle that took us to the main airport, and we picked up our luggage, which was already running on the carousel before our bodies had even arrived. Things work like they're supposed to. Things are not only on time, they're early. We missed a couple of trains, which was not a big deal because there were more 5 to 10 minutes behind them. But there were times where trains would show up 2 minutes early and then they'd be like, we're gone, sucka. Like, we're not waiting. So it's for real. When they say be there on time, everything's on time. Yes, that is true. It's fantastic if you're visiting from a foreign country because things go according to plan. Of course, that's not always the case, but it's a very dependable country with a lot of very dependable systems, and I'm very grateful for that as a foreign first-time visitor. Okay, so that's it. Those were the 6 things that surprised me about my visit to Japan. What do you think? Does Japan sound like a place you'd be interested in going? Have you already gone? What surprised you when you went? I'd love to know, and I'm definitely going to follow up on this series with some more stuff about Japan. I'll show you some of the souvenirs we brought back. I'll tell you what else I would like to have in the States that Japan has, and I'll probably share with you some of the things that you should bring if you decide to travel to Japan in the future. Japan is a wonderful country and very friendly when it comes to travel. Like I said, the systems in place are great, but also the people. The people are so kind, and that was no surprise to me based on what I heard before leaving. So if you even have an inkling of interest in traveling to Japan, please do it. And I would love to talk to you about it before you go because it was truly special to me and I would love to go back someday. Before you go, I would love it if you would like, comment, or subscribe. I'm not greedy, I don't need all 3, and I'll see you next time.